Well, here we are on chapter 16, and we're starting to look at the endocrine system. So, some things that I want you to consider as we look at this. Just what is the endocrine system? Understanding exocrine versus endocrine glands, how steroid and peptide hormones affect cells and how they're different in those interactions. I want you to be able to name the major glands and how they function within the endocrine system. We're going to talk a little about diabetes so that we can understand how these hormones can work and what happens if they don't work. And then also to look at how the endocrine and nervous system work with the rest of the systems in the body for maintaining homeostasis. So when we think about the endocrine system, it is primarily comprised of glands. It's secreting hormones that move through the bloodstream specifically to target cells. Not every cell will react to every hormone. And the results in a slow but very prolonged response. This is different than how the nervous system would work. We look at what we have as part of the endocrine glands and the endocrine system. We have the hypothalamus, which is up in the brain, the pituitary gland, which is right below the hypothalamus, the parathyroids located on either side of the thyroid, the thymus, which sits right on top of the heart. It actually gets smaller as you get older. The pancreas, the adrenal gland, and the adrenal cortex, which sit on top of the kidneys. And then depending on being male or female, we have the testes or the ovaries. So one thing we have to understand in order to look at the endocrine system is we need to look at how target cells actually work. We have these cell membranes that have a tremendous number of lipids and proteins and all sorts of things hanging around on the outside. In this cartoon, we are only paying attention to one particular type of protein. And this has a receptor specific to one type of hormone. Remember, proteins have very specific shapes. And so you can see that this particular hormone will lock into that receptor, triggering an effect. We have a gland that would be making that hormone that is being carried through the bloodstream. And then when it reaches the right type of, well, it'll reach everywhere in your body, but it only affects those target cells that have that protein receptor. When we think about an exocrine versus an endocrine gland, there's a couple of key differences. Exocrine glands secrete their products into ducts, and those carry these products to other organs outside the body. Endocrine glands secrete their products directly into the bloodstream. So you can think about exocrine having ducts to carry these products, whereas endocrine glands secrete them into the bloodstream. So they're going to be carried all over the body. Hormones specifically are chemical signals that promote communication between cells, body parts, even individuals. They come in some different forms. Prostaglandins are local hormones, and they only affect neighboring cells. They typically are not going to be in the bloodstream. This is where we have those ducts that we were just talking about. Pheromones are chemical signals that leave the body and then affect other individuals. We don't see this as common in humans, but we can see pheromones being really common in other organisms, even other mammals. Again, these are chemical signals that are influencing behavior of other individuals. Within the body, though, the two main hormones, and these are the ones that we'll spend most of our time talking about, are either peptide hormones, which are built out of protein, and those lock into specific receptors that are on the plasma membrane. And they form a complex which activates a cascade of other effects within a cell. Steroid hormones don't have receptors. These are a lipid, and because they're a lipid, they can get through that cell membrane and go into the cell itself, affecting gene activity and then eventually protein synthesis. If you look at the action of a peptide hormone, here you can see it leaving the bloodstream, coming out to an area where we have a target cell with a specific receptor. It locks into that receptor. Now, it might hit other things and it's just not going to react with it because it doesn't have that correct shape. The binding of that hormone will then lead to the activation of an enzyme cascade. It'll change ATP to CAMP, which is a second messenger that we have going on coming from another place. This will then have another cascade effect. In this particular example, what we're seeing is glycogen being converted to glucose. So there would have been a specific signal in the body saying, hey, our blood sugar levels are too low. It would cause the release of glucagon, which is a hormone that locks into a specific type of receptor, causing a cascade of reactions, eventually breaking glycogen down into glucose, which then can go into the bloodstream, raising the blood sugar levels. A steroid hormone works slightly differently. This is going to be coming from the bloodstream as well, but because it's a lipid, it can get through that plasma membrane. It'll even bind into a receptor site within the nucleus, and it will activate particular proteins that cause pieces of DNA to be copied, leading to these messengers that can go out into ribosomes to manufacture proteins. So you'll notice that this effect is much more directly on the manufacture of proteins within the nucleus, and it'll be for a very specific type of protein. In the next section, we'll look at some of the different kinds of glands.